A beige box on a desk in your house is screaming. That night it was losing a war. You know the sound. The name across the front of it was US Robotics. What you never knew is that 56K had split the modem world into two camps whose hardware could not talk to each other. On the 30th of September, 2025, America's most famous dial-up service switched off. The box is still for sale. 9 models of it sit on the company store page right now as current stock. The firm that built them has been sold, split off, bought back by its own managers, and sold on twice more. Before any of that, though, there was one night in your house and a sound coming through the wall. Stay with this, and you come out of it knowing 3 things. What your modem was fighting at the other end. Why the house across the street got a faster connection off the same copper as yours. And where that beige box is sold, tonight, with a part number and a price. The last of the 3 is the strangest, so it is parked at the end. The dialing came first, ordinary tones, the same ones anyone used to call a school. Then a hiss. Then 2 voices climbing over each other like an argument in a room down the hall. Then static, a beat of silence, and a row of green lights settling into a pattern you learned to read without anyone ever teaching you. If the house was quiet, you could follow the whole sequence from the next room, and you knew before you reached the doorway whether you were about to sit down or start again. Nobody taught you that sound. You picked it up the way people learn an engine that is about to fail. From repetition, standing in a hallway, waiting, and the things you learned were not superstition. The connection got worse after dinner, because the exchange was busier then. Lift the kitchen phone in the next room and the call collapsed on the spot. You were right about all of it, because the modem was reading the line out loud, and the line was different every night. 56K never meant kilobytes. It meant kilobits. In a good second, that came out under 7 kilobytes, which is why a single photograph could take a minute and anything larger stopped being an action and became a plan. You started a download before bed and hoped nobody needed the telephone. Plenty of people never got near the number printed on the box. Some of you connected at 53. Some sat at 46 and never moved. And a few of you owned a modem that refused to reach full speed on your own provider, no matter what the salesman had promised in the shop. That was not your wiring. 2 American camps had pointed incompatible hardware at each other, and your living room was the range. The reason a modem from that fight is still in a catalog today starts with a name lifted out of a paperback. The name on your modem came out of a novel. Isaac Asimov wrote a book called I, Robot, and inside it there is a fictional firm called US Robot and Mechanical Men. In the stories, that firm grows into the greatest company in the galaxy. 5 men in Chicago borrowed it. The name promised a future before there was anything at all to sell. Their first address was Lincoln Avenue, the floor above an Army surplus store. 400 square feet, not one window. The year was 1976, and nothing you would recognize as the internet existed yet. Casey Cowell, Steve Muka, and Paul Collard put their names on the paperwork, with Stan Metcalf and Tom Rawson alongside them. At that point, almost nobody had a reason to own a modem. There was no consumer network to reach. Universities and defense contractors had ARPANET, and a household had nothing to dial that would answer. What existed instead was a scattering of computers with phone lines attached. You dialed a number that belonged to a computer rather than a person, and whatever answered was software. What they built first were acoustic couplers. You pushed a telephone handset into a rubber cradle, and the machine listened to it through the earpiece. The USR 310. The USR 330. The phone link 300, which moved data at exactly the speed its own name advertised. The first cases were cast in mahogany molds. Text arrived 1 character at a time, visibly, and the machine at the far end could hear the room you were sitting in. The courier name goes back further than the box you remember. US Robotics sold the first one in 1979, and it went to companies rather than houses. Then, In 1986, the company put a protocol of its own design inside it and stamped 3 letters on the case. HST, for high-speed technology. Trellis encoding ran at about 4 times as fast as an ordinary modem of the day, for roughly twice the money. What made it fast was an honest look at how a phone line actually gets used. An ordinary modem splits the line evenly, half the capacity each way, as though both ends had the same amount to say. They almost never did. You called a machine, asked it for a file, and then sat there while it poured one way down the wire. So HST stopped pretending. It gave nearly the whole line to the direction carrying the file and left a narrow lane coming back. 300 bits a second, and later 450, wide enough to say yes and nothing else. Then the catch. And the catch was the point. An HST only ran at that speed against another HST. On a call with any other brand, both machines dropped to 2400, the speed the whole world already had. That sounds like a defect. It was the entire commercial idea, which is why the next move was less a discount than an occupation. If you ran a board out of a back bedroom, US Robotics sold you a Courier for about half of shop price. A price list a SysOp compiled in 1991 puts it plainly. $995 over the counter. $449 for you. You had to earn it. The board needed months of real callers behind it, and the company checked by hand, dialing your number to hear whether anything answered, and dialing again weeks later to see whether it still did. Approval ran 3 to 4 weeks. Then you agreed to 2 things. Keep the modem on the board, and put a line on the logon screen naming what was answering the phone. That second condition is the strategy in one sentence. It bought the company a brand name on the first screen you saw at 2 in the morning, in the one place a hobbyist would have thrown an advertisement out. And it took. Going into the 90s, more boards answered in HST than in the open standard the committee had published. Others tried it and could not make it hold. Hayes, whose command set every modem on Earth had copied, built a fast protocol of its own, and because it could not speak to an HST, it never took root on the boards you wanted to reach. Telebit went elsewhere, and its trailblazer became the standard on the Unix side of the world instead. Then the committee caught up. An open standard arrived that anybody could build, and US Robotics answered with the dual standard. One unit speaking its own protocol, and the committees at once. Keep the customer whichever way the standard falls. Remember that one. It comes back. But a Courier could only be carried forward so far, and the SysOps hit that wall first. When the open standard was pushed up to the speed HST had already reached, the version that could meet it sat on an all-new circuit board, and no modem already sold could become one. There was a trade-up instead. $575, and they wanted your old Courier in the box with it. The SysOp who typed that price list called the offer a ripoff. Hold that. 3 years later, the same company shipped a box built, so that bill would never arrive again. 20 years after that windowless room, the Sportster was the best-selling desktop modem in the world. Not the fastest one in any given month, the one that sat on the desks. It went into computer shops, into mail-order catalogs, into the machines your family carried home from a warehouse store, and it turned 5 people in a rented room into a company the rest of the industry had to answer. The numbers moved the way software numbers move, not hardware ones. One fiscal year the company took in $889 million. The following year closed at nearly $2 billion, a doubling inside 12 months for a business that has to build and ship every dollar it earns, box by box, to desks like yours. Nearly 6,000 people worked there. The product names ran on and on. Courier and Megahertz and Sportster and Total Control and NetServer among them, and one of them was the most interesting product the company ever made. Some of that growth was bought rather than built. In 1994, the company moved on Megahertz, whose credit card-sized modems slid into the side of a laptop, and those cards became the best-selling brand of their kind. Cowell put the policy in one line. "Whether we have developed or acquired it," he said, "the technology we control succeeds in the marketplace." US Robotics was also the first company in the business to buy television time for a modem, which tells you who it thought you had become. If a modem sat in your family's first computer, there is a fair chance this was the name on it. It came inside the machine, or it came in a beige case beside the tower with a row of lights across the front. Those lights were the only part of a computer that ever told you the plain truth. The Sportster paid for all of it. It was not the box the engineers were proudest of. That one cost more, sat in a heavier case, and was sold on a promise that hardware companies almost never make. In 1994, that box did not say V everything on the front. It said Courier V34 ready. That was a promise rather than a description, because V34 did not exist yet. A committee in another country was still arguing over it, so what reached your desk carried an interim version called VFC and a hole where the finished standard was supposed to go. What arrived to fill that hole was not a new box. It was a file. When V34 was finally settled, Courier owners downloaded the code, flashed it into the modem sitting on the desk, and the machine became something it had not been that morning. The metal never changed. The brains did. And here is the odd thing about that metal. US Robotics did not make it. Every component in it was bought from somebody else. And the signal processors at the heart of the modem you owned came from Texas Instruments, the same parts a rival could order by the tray. There was no secret silicon to defend. What the company owned was the code it wrote for chips anybody could buy, and code is the one thing that fits down the telephone line in your wall. Flashing one was not gentle. You ran a program from a command line and sat still for a couple of minutes while the lights did something you had never seen them do. If the power failed halfway through, you owned a paperweight. People did it anyway, on hardware they had already paid for. That happened with X2. It happened again with V90. A modem bought before any of those three standards existed followed all of them, and the screwdriver never left the drawer. Some of those updates were free. The X2 update was free for a limited window, and then it was not, and anyone who tells you the company promised free upgrades forever is repeating a legend rather than a fact. Some V90 flashes needed a paid license key. What US Robotics sold was a box designed to be worth keeping. The name you remember arrived 2 years after the hardware did. V Everything, from '96, and by then the box had earned it. Everything meant it would still hold a conversation with slow, old, badly maintained equipment at the other end, dropping down through standard after standard until it found one that survived a bad line. Your phone line was old. Somebody else's exchange was older. This is the part that stops me. Every other consumer electronics company in that decade was learning the opposite lesson. Sell the box, obsolete the box, sell the box again. The upgrade cycle was the business model, and it still is, in your pocket, on a 2-year contract. US Robotics built a product whose entire selling point was that you would not have to buy the next one. You paid more on the day, and that was the whole transaction printed plainly on the carton. Go back to that night in your house. The box on the desk was not losing. It was built to survive losing, which is a completely different piece of design. That is the reason a Courier is still in a catalog, while almost nothing else from that decade is. Hold on to that, because the catalog is where this ends. Which leaves the obvious problem. A company this careful about its hardware did not survive its own decade, and the answer has nothing at all to do with engineering. In September of 1986, US Robotics announced a new way to pull more speed out of the ordinary phone line in your wall. It called the method X2. The claim was roughly double the speed of the fastest modems then on sale. Rockwell and Lucent answered within weeks, and shipped their version in February of 1987. The name they put on it was K56 Flex. The two methods were not compatible, not slower with each other, not compatible. The speed you got depended on the equipment at the far end of the call, which meant it depended on whatever your internet provider had bolted into its racks. If your provider ran the other camp's hardware, your expensive new modem dropped back to the old speeds and stayed there. Walk into a computer shop then, and the shelf told you nothing useful. Boxes from both camps said 56K on the front in the same size type. What decided whether the number was real sat in a rack in a building you had never visited, owned by the company you paid every month. US Robotics sold those racks too, which is how a fight over a household gadget turned into a fight between corporate purchasing departments. That is the answer to the thing you noticed at the time. The number you were stuck at was rarely your telephone line and rarely your computer. It was a standards war being fought through your wall socket by two groups of engineers who had never met you. Boardwatch magazine ran tests over real lines in March of 1998. US Robotics equipment completed the connection 90.4% of the time. The Rockwell side came in at 79. On a technology where a failed call meant hanging up, redialing, and waiting again, that gap was the whole argument. Then, 3Com, which by that point owned US Robotics, did the thing that decided the war. It guaranteed that whatever standard the International Committee finally chose, existing customers would be carried to it by a free software update. No trade-in. Not a discount on next year's model. A file you downloaded. On the 6th of February, 1998, the ITU agreed on a single standard and named it V90. Both camps could reach it in firmware. So the winner of the 56K war was not the better waveform. It was the side that had already promised, in writing, that being on the losing side would cost you nothing. Neither trade name survived the peace that followed. X2 disappeared. K56 Flex went with it. What survived was a number both camps could reach by download, and the modems that got there did it overnight, without a carton going back to a shop. Testing did not stop when the fighting did. Henderson Communications Laboratories compared the V90 modems that came out of the settlement, and the US Robotics unit finished ahead of every other brand on the two things you actually feel: how fast it connected, whether it stayed connected. The company that made that promise was, by then, no longer running itself. The date was the 26th of February. 3Com agreed to buy the company that had built the box on your desk. The price was $6.6 billion. Shareholders were paid in stock, not cash. By the time the deal closed that June, the value had climbed past $8 billion. It was the largest merger the networking industry had ever done. The size of it usually gets told backwards. In the first full year under the new roof, the modem side brought in $2.5 billion of 3Com's $5.6 billion in sales. 44.5%. The company that made the sound in your house was the smaller half of the thing that swallowed it. Then it went wrong. 3Com closed its May of '98 year at $5.42 billion, down 3% on the year before it. The reason given was not some distant division you had never heard of. Sales had fallen on client access products. Adapter cards. V90 modems. The thing it had paid more than $8 billion to own. It had bought the modem business at the exact moment the modem business stopped paying. You never saw any of this from the desk. The modem kept working. The lights kept blinking in the same order they always had. Underneath it, the company was being taken apart and put back together by people who had never touched the product. In March of 2000, the handheld computer business Palm was spun off on its own. 3 months later, the modem business went out the same door. 3Com folded it into a joint venture with Acton Technology and Nat Steel Electronics, kept less than 20% of it, and the new US Robotics opened for business that September. What walked out of that building was a brand, a product line, and an engineering group attached to somebody else's factories. None of it reached you. In 2004, the company's own management bought back control from the contract manufacturer holding it. Platinum Equity, a private equity firm, took it the year after. In 2013, a software holding company, Unicom Global, bought it outright in cash. A man named Corey Hong ended up owning the brand behind the sound in your hallway. 4 owners after 3Com, and the product kept shipping. Most dead computer brands survive only as paperwork, a trademark licensed out to companies that printed on things the original engineers never saw. That did not happen here. Each owner kept building the hardware, and the model numbers kept moving forward. 3Com did worse. 12 years after that merger, Hewlett-Packard bought the whole company. The price, in 2009, was $2.7 billion. That is under half of what 3Com had paid for the modem business by itself. The name disappeared from the market not long after, and you have not seen it on anything since. The brand that got bought outlived the brand that bought it. On the 30th of September last year, America Online switched off its dial-up internet service. The notice went up on its own support pages, and it listed the dialer software and the browser built for slow connections. All discontinued on the same day. That is the closest thing this technology has to a death certificate. For a lot of you, it was also the first news that the service had still been running at all. That notice is still not a death certificate. Dial-up peaked at 41% of American adults in 2001 and fell to roughly 0.5% of households by 2019. It did not fall off a cliff. It leaked. 15% of adults were still dialing in 2007, and 3% were still doing it in 2013, years after everyone you knew had stopped. Small is not the same as gone. Somebody in this country woke up this morning and connected the way you used to, on a line that was never upgraded because the upgrade never arrived, and the box did not go anywhere either. The store page at usr.com lists 9 dial-up modems as current products today. Below them sits a short section headed end of life with 2 more. The flagship on that page is still a Courier, and the company sells it refurbished, described on its own listing as the recommended replacement for every Courier it has discontinued. The Courier light underneath it is marked discontinued. That is the same badge that shipped in '94, when the box on your desk was new. The copyright line at the bottom of the page reads 2026. Nobody keeps 9 versions of a product in a catalog for a market that does not exist. Which means somebody is still ordering the thing you threw out. Everything around that box has been switched off. The service it dialed is gone. The parent company that paid more than $8 billion for it no longer exists. And the box is on a shelf somewhere with a price on it and a part number, waiting for an order that still arrives. It was built by people who assumed you would want to keep it. Of everything they built into it, that is the only feature that ended up mattering. One request, and then this is finished. Go and open the drawer where all the old cables live. If a beige box with that name on the front is still in there, read the model number off the label and put it in the comments. Not the memory. The number is the entire ask.